been the king of budget gaming laptops for years, and the new 2025 model delivers better FPS in games, longer battery life, and quieter fans. But as always, there's a catch. So let's go through what they've made worse, what they've made better, and whether the lock is still worth buying in this review. The lock is available in Lenovo's Lunar Grey finish, and with one finger, and the screen goes the full way back. The hinges flex a little if the screen gets pushed back too far, so avoid trying to go beyond 180 degrees. Otherwise, the hinges feel fine, even when ripping the lid open way too fast. It's the same size as last year's version, so not thin, but I wouldn't call it thick either. It's a fairly average size for a 15 to 16 inch gaming laptop, and still feels quite portable. The laptop by itself weighs in at almost 5.5 pounds or 2.5 kilos, increasing to 6.6 pounds or 3 kilos with the 100 170-watt charger included. It's also available with a bigger 245-watt charger for $15, and we'll get into why that upgrade might be worth it later. It still weighs much the same compared to older Lock 15s that we've tested, a fairly average result compared to most other 15 to 16-inch laptops tested. Not heavy, not light, just right. It actually lowers a few positions with the charger included, as the 170-watt brick is lighter compared to what most other laptops are paired with. But of course, that would be a bit different with the larger 245-watt charger. The configuration I bought has an older Intel 13th gen processor, but there's an AMD version 2. Mine also has Nvidia's the link below, which will affect up. The key brightness is a little dim in a lit room, but it's fine when it gets darker, which is when you need it. You can cycle through the first 6 lighting effects with a function and spacebar shortcut, but unlike higher tier Legion laptops, there's no shortcut for adjusting keyboard brightness. That can only be done through the included Legion Space software, which is the control panel for the laptop. This also lets you customize the effects, and you can drag them around to change the can be used to charge or for connecting a monitor. I thought it was a bit weird they chose connecting to the iGPU for lighter tasks means quite the middle, the installed SSD in the primary slot on the right, spare M.2 storage slot on the far left, and Wi-Fi card just below that. Wi-Fi performance was bad. Well, at least compared to most other laptops tested, as it only has Wi-Fi 6. But realistically, this isn't too far off gigabit speeds, so most use default, mine came with a short shorter drive, and I had to use pliers to loosen its standoff if I want to install a longer one. Other higher tier Legion laptops I've had used standoffs that could be removed with a Phillips head screwdriver, so not sure why the lock misses out on this small with chips on both sides. The locks don't sound amazing, but they're less tinny, have a little more bass, and don't have as much wrist rest vibration compared to the Legion 5. But the latency mon results were bad in our 5-minute idle test. My lock is powered by a 60 watt-hour battery, but there's also a larger capacity 80 watt-hour option. The Legion Space software gives you the option to automatically lower the screen's refresh rate to 60 Hz to save power when you unplug the charger, which is why the screen flashes black, and it goes back up to 144 Hz when you plug back in. You can manually swap the refresh rate at any time with the Function Plus R shortcut. You can also limit the battery's maximum charge level to 80% in the Vantage software to help the battery last longer, as keeping it fully charged all the time can degrade it. But this can't be enabled at the same time as rapid charge, and you can also make the battery charge slower overnight, again to help improve longevity. Battery life wasn't bad for an Intel-based laptop, lasting for between them. Air comes into the fans through the holes on the bottom panel and only gets exhausted out of the back. So no hot air blowing on your mouse hand. The Legion Space software quickly apply this overclock to the GPU to see the different standard built-in modes. So some strangely inconsistent results from the lock. The bigger problem is that while running those stress tests for a couple of hours for the thermal testing, the battery charge level dropped down from 92% to 66%, meaning the included 107 75-watt charger isn't enough to indefinitely sustain this laptop running under full load, as it has to start drawing from the battery to make up the difference. And this happened last gen too. I mean, it'll still perform perfectly fine at full load for many hours. Probably not that big of a deal in practice, especially as most games won't simultaneously max out both the CPU and GPU. But if you're planning on really long gaming sessions with resource-heavy games, then it might be worth considering the optional 245-watt charger, which is a 15 processors. Performance doesn't lower too much when we unplug the charger and run on battery power. And this time, it was notably better compared to those other laptops at 300 nits, which is there are quite a few cheaper laptops that have come out in the last couple of years that are faster. Even older lock shows up on screen in Counter-Strike 2. I mean, it's not great that it's the highest preset the game offers without ray tracing. NVIDIA's RTX 5070 Ti desktop card and 5070 Ti laptop GPU share the same name, but the performance is NVIDIA's RTX 5070 Ti desktop card and 5070 Ti laptop GPU share the same name, but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermals, fan noise, and more to show you all the differences. For starters, the laptop version is using a smaller die that's
So today we are at the Santa Clara Micro Center, and we have a special guest, Jay's 2 cents.
Hello.
And he wants to talk to us about RAM and RAM timing.
I think it's a confusing subject a lot of people don't understand. You've got latency experience because you're making up for any of the inefficiencies that could take place with the communication between RAM and CPU.
Right.
But yes, sometimes the fastest RAM kits are not the most latency free. So that's why I love this Tech Power Up calculator here.
Let's pull this up. So on the right here, I'm going to put in, we'll do our Trident Z5, right?
Okay.
memory bandwidth, but perhaps most important, for starters, the laptop version is but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermals, fan noise, and more to show you all the differences. For starters, the laptop version is using a smaller die that's GPU share the same name, but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermals, fan noise, and more to show you all the differences. For starters, the laptop version is using a smaller die that's closer to the 5070 desktop GPU. So the desktop version of the 5070 Ti ends up with 52% more CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores compared to the laptop. A massive difference for 2 parts with the same name. The desktop version has 33 share the same name, but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermal. NVIDIA's RTX 5070 Ti desktop card and 5070 Ti laptop GPU share the same name, but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermals, fan noise, and more to show you all the differences. For starters, the laptop version is using a smaller die that's closer to the 5070 desktop GPU. So the desktop version of the 5070 Ti ends up with 52% more CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores compared to the laptop. A massive difference for 2 parts with the same name. The desktop version has 33% more VRAM capacity, along with a bigger memory bus and more memory. NVIDIA's RTX 5070 Ti desktop card and 5070 Ti laptop GPU share the same name, but the performance is completely different. I've compared both in 25 games at 3 resolutions, as well as power draw, thermals, fan noise, and more to show you all the differences. For starters, the laptop version is using a smaller die that's closer to the 5070 desktop GPU. So the desktop version of the 5070 Ti ends up with 52% more CUDA, Tensor, and RT cores compared to the laptop. A massive difference for two parts with the same name. The desktop version has 33% more VRAM capacity, along with a bigger memory bus and more memory bandwidth. But perhaps most importantly, the desktop card can run up to 300 watts, while the laptop version maxes out at just 140 watts. So it gets less than half the amount of power. Of course, less power is always going to be expected with laptop hardware. There's just less space for cooling. But still, those are some pretty big differences from two products that are named 5070 Ti. And that definitely could be misleading to people that don't otherwise know the difference. Nvidia does include the laptop GPU text on the end of the laptop 5070 Ti, but I don't think that's quite as obvious as back in the day when they used to put the letter M on the end to signify that it was a mobile part, like AMD still does. I'm using XMG's Neo 16 laptop for this testing, as it's the most powerful gaming laptop with an RTX 5070 Ti laptop GPU I've come across so far. This thing has support for liquid cooling, which would further boost FPS, but I've tested it on air cooling to better represent a more typical 5070 Ti laptop. Gaming laptops with these specs aren't quite as expensive as the 5080 and 5090 versions, but they're still far from cheap. So if we find any good sales, we'll add them to the gaminglaptop.deals website. Check it out and save money on your next gaming laptop with that link below. My test PC for the desktop 5070 Ti card has received a huge upgrade this year thanks to MSI. From the motherboard, power supply, SSD, case, and cooler, MSI pretty much does it all now. You can find links to all the parts in the description. There are always going to be differences between laptop and desktop using all that extra power. Again, laptops simply to clock higher in